The allocation to the THA for fiscal year 2023 thus totals $2.521 billion. When disaggregated, $2.194 billion is allocated for recurrent expenditure, $300 million for the THA development program, $18 million for URP, and $9.2 million for CPEP in Tobago.
Welcome back to the Now Morning Show, just about 70 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock. Now, the Tobago House of Assembly Chief Secretary Farley Augustine is disappointed with Tobago's 4.3% budget allocation for fiscal year 2023. And he is in studio to talk about that allocation right now. Mr. Augustine, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Now, we were talking off air about that loud gasp that we heard when the Minister of Finance would have mentioned that $2.5 billion for the budget allocation. But before we get there, in June, you would have presented the $3.97 billion that you were expecting, and you were saying that that was in keeping with the DRC. What is the DRC? How does it guide that conversation in terms of the allocation?
Well, the gaps came about because, one, I was able to predict the expenditure correctly. In June, I predicted that we will be spending around $57 billion. So it means that the technocrats and the advisors in the Division of Finance, Trade and Economy, they got the arithmetic right. And it means that we were looking predictively at what we were going to spend and hoping that we could get 6.9%. DRC stands for Dispute Resolution Commission. In 2001, late 2000, the THA found that it was being underfunded. In those days, we weren't getting anywhere close to even $100 million to run the entire island of Tobago. And so it triggered something in law whenever there is a conflict in terms of budget between the Tobago House of Assembly and the central government. We trigger what is known as a Dispute Resolution Commission, where the THA appoints one person, the central government one, and the president appoints a third. And this panel meets and assesses and presents a report. The report presented said that THA should get between 4.03% and 6.9% of the national budget, because it was recognized then that the island's development was grossly underfunded. And given that we were underfunded for the first 20 years of the Tobago House of Assembly, we have to play catch up. And you will hear me make some points about the fact that people still have to take flights for medical attention in Trinidad or for tertiary education. That's because there are certain sectors on the island that are still underdeveloped. And so for us to be on par with Trinidad, it means that we need a little more so that we could drive the development agenda at a much faster pace.
No, but
so
the
that
2.5.
If we had a little more, then we could do a lot more, certainly.
Right. But with the $2.5 billion that you were given, right, a huge chunk of that is for recurrent expenditure. And I think like $300 million, in addition to the loan financing that you have, is for development. What are your thoughts on that? Is that enough to get Tobago where it needs to be? Well,
that's an economic quagmire that Tobago has found itself in, where the substantial part of its budget goes to recurrent expenditure. Recurrent expenditure will be paying off salaries, paying off bills, travel, the everyday operational costs of the Tobago House of Assembly. And of course, those are not necessarily productive costs, as opposed to capital development, which is what you use to build new schools, to do new roads, to invest. To put it simply, in your household, your recurrent expenditure will be the monies you use to pay your grocery bill, pay for the lights, the water, telecommunications. That's recurrent expenditure. But you see, if you need to add on a new room because some of the children getting bigger and they need an extra space or an additional bathroom, or you need to finally put the roof on the upstairs you have been building, that's capital development. And so capital development is what drives new development ideas and thoughts and drives innovation. Recurrent expenditure, which is the largest of the budget, literally drives the operations and keeps the lights on and keeps the THA open. And so the quagmire really is, how do we find a way without putting people on the breadline to reduce recurrent expenditure costs and to ramp up capital development costs on the other hand. And you would appreciate that now is not the best time to say, well, okay, our recurrent expenditure cost is too high, let's fire people and ramp up capital development. And so 300 million is insufficient for the kinds of capital development that is required. Additionally, when you look at one simple project, Scarborough Secondary School, which we know we have to build, and I'm intent on us finding a way to start building that school. And I did get some, in all honesty, some commitment from the Minister of Finance that he will try to find a way for us to fund that when that project gets up and running. Yeah. But we have a school that's literally moving away into the sea because of geological issues. It's along a fault line. We have caving happening in and around the school. It's on the coast, serious coastal erosion. And when I passed on about 2 Mondays ago and look at the state of disrepair, we have no choice but to start building the school post-haste. The average cost of a school, one secondary school, is over $200 million. So think about that in the context of $300 million. You know, so certainly it is never enough. But the challenge now for us in Tobago is to look at how do we ramp up our revenues outside of transfers and subsidies from the government, from the central government. And that's why we have been looking at areas like Stolly Park Quarry, which the minister mentioned. And it's a good time to mention that we have, in fact, applied for an export license for Stolly Park Quarry.
I like that you mentioned that, because I'm wondering how as well are you going to get the foreign investment in to help with this revenue as well? Right,
and the reason for applying for the export license for Stolly Park Quarry is because the demand is great from outside of the Tobago space, because Guyana is on a building frenzy, it seems. And so that would bring much needed forex. We also have to look at tourism-related developments and how do we drive that, improve the room quality, room stock on the island. We also have to look at the fact that the THA is the single largest landholder and owner on the island. That presents an opportunity too, because it means that we can say to potential investors, we have the land as our share, you come with your money and build the hotel, build the marina, build what's needed, and let's partner in getting it done for the people of Tobago. So we have to also utilize these alternative financing models to get some of these services available to the people of Tobago.
Right. Now, one of the things as well was the increase in prices for the air and the sea bridge. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because already we're having complaints that there are not enough flights going between the two islands, and then even when we have enough flights, there's not an efficient service that the citizens can depend on if they're going from one island to the next. So how does this factor into everything we've been discussing?
And that's the challenge we have with inter-island transportation. I could take a bus from Port of Spain to east, to west, to central, to south, but I can't take a bus from Port of Spain to Scarborough. And if we're saying it's one country, then there must be a mechanism to connect both islands. And that connectivity comes through the inter-island ferry service and the airline service provided by Caribbean Airlines. And it goes beyond the cost of the seats. It has to do with the efficiency of the service that is being provided. Pre-COVID, we had 24 flights, 24 round trips. Post-COVID, we have only gone to 12, and we are trying and advocating for us to go beyond 12. And we are working with Caribbean Airlines. We have been in conversation with them. We met with them. I met with them just about a week ago. And so we are having very cordial conversations. And I'll commend the CEO and the chairman for the cordial conversations. And we are trying to work out with them ways of increasing the flight load, because those in the accommodation sector, they are saying, look, people are cancelling their bookings because they just can't come. We're having Carnival in October, and people say, we want flights, we want to come. Everybody excited to come, but all the available flights and sailings have been booked out. And we're working on how we can work on some increases there. And so it's about efficiency, but there's a larger issue at play. For many of us in Tobago, the use of the air and sea bridge is out of as an essential service and not luxury. We're not coming, no disrespect, but we're not coming to Trinidad to go to Maracas. We're not coming to sip pina colada with an umbrella in the side of the glass.
Yeah.
When we're coming because there is a need for medical attention. We're coming because there's need for education services. We're coming because, based on the THA Act, there is still a 7th schedule where there are lists of services that are not under the remit of the THA. And there are still some 6 scheduled services that ought to be provided in Tobago that are still not provided in Tobago. So we're coming for business. We're coming for medical attention. We're coming for educational services. And again, all of this is because the Tobago's development was stymied for the first 20 years or so of the THA's existence. And we're still trying to play catch up.
Of course.
And so for us, the service has to be efficient. The cost is one factor, but beyond that, we have to look at how we can ramp up efficiency, ensure the booking issues are not there. Because I'm sure you have experienced it. You go online, you're trying to book, it's saying
and everything is marked off because I can't get anything
else. But then
else,
you go to the airport and you may get on a flight.
Well, standby, yes.
To standby.
Yes, yes.
And you may go on the flight and you see that there are some empty seats. But why was it booked up? Why were the seats available when I checked online or I checked at the ticket counter? We have to
Mr.
work
Augustine,
out those kinks.
Of course, moving quickly along as well. How does the Tobago autonomy factor into all of this?
Well, the Tobago autonomy is perhaps the most important element in this entire conversation. Because should Tobago be granted greater autonomy, we have an opportunity as economists like Dr. Vanos James will say, to help drive the nation's diversification efforts. Autonomy is more than just making Tobagonians feel like men and women, but it's also about giving us legislative authority for some simple things that we do not now have. And I'll give you a classic point. In November of 2021, just before the first THA election in January 2022, we met as a house and we unanimously, meaning all sides, I was in the minority at that point, voted to send a bill to Parliament for Tobago marine parks. And that was sent down to Parliament, and to this point, the Parliament has not picked it up on its agenda. Yeah. In other words, we cannot in Tobago just decide, we need to have these marine parks, and we're going to set up these marine parks, and we're going to create legislation around the marine parks. But yet, Tobago prides itself in being green. We have all these awards and designation for being a green and environmentally friendly space. In fact, it is one of our competitive advantages. And so, but we can't monetize that in a real way without having the legislative authority so to monetize the blue economy, which has to do with our marine space, and that goes beyond oil and gas, to be able to ensure that we can position Tobago in a much bolder place. And it is not secession, and this exists in other jurisdictions, even within the Commonwealth. You go to the United Kingdom, they have devolution of powers. You go to St. Kitts Nevis, they have a federation. So they recognize that when you have a country where that is not a complete whole, that you have to have devolution of powers to the extent that the outlying regions have some measure of autonomy to be able to drive its development, its socioeconomic development.
Now, Mr. Augustine, we have seconds to go, but quickly, there has been talk that you may leave the PDP party to form your own party, and I want you to respond to that quickly. We have a few seconds.
I have not made any moves in that regard. At this point, I'm still a member of the PDP.
Right.
I have not been kicked out of the party. I've been removed as deputy political leader. But that's as far as that has gone at this point. My focus is on the governance of Tobago. And Trinidad and Tobago will do well to learn a lesson from the THA in terms of how we are structured. Because the good thing is that the THA is not controlled by political party. Right. It's insulated in the way it is structured in law. And that, for me, is the best thing about the democracy we have on the island of Tobago.
Thank you, Mr. Augustine. We never have enough time. We're going to have you back again soon.
Listen,
but thank you so much.
To come up for Carnival.
Well, listen, we will talk about that off air, but we have to go to break right now. Mr. Augustine, always a pleasure to have you here. That was the Tobago House of Assembly Chief Secretary, Mr. Farley Augustine, just sharing exactly his thoughts on the budget. Stay with us, because up next we have Shamla with Unique Not Different. Stay with us.